Okay, we're going to look at writing a report, and that's just taking all the statistical things you've been doing, your equations and your R and your R squared, and putting them all into nice, neat sentences. And I'll show you that with an example. Okay, I'm using some data from exercise 4C, if you're using the same textbook. And so list one is age in years. That's our list one. And list two is price in dollars. I'll just do a symbol for dollars. There we go. And that's the data I've just put it into list one, list two of the calculator to get the values I need to make my report. So we've gone calc linear reg, and we're making sure that yes, we do want the X is going to be list one, Y is going to be list two. So remember, just do that little sort of thing where you're writing on the side, that sort of thing of going like, okay, so list one equals the age, and then list two is the dollars, and then list three, we're going to be the residual, because we might want to do a residual analysis there. So you might want to also not forget to switch this one and click that to list three. So most of what we need for the report just comes from this screen. So we've got an A, a B, an R, and an R squared. And we've got to make sure we've got all those things to the right decimal places. All right, now we're going to go for, and this is good practice for everybody, we're going to go for three significant figures. All right, so let's look at our first value for A. And if I just highlight that, so A, and we've got the value 35134.058. So let's count our significant figures. 1, 2, 3. So we've got to ignore the rest of that. Just gets ignored. So no, we've got to ignore all that. So, but we need some placeholders. So we do know that this value is the 3 and the 5 and the 1. And we looked at this next digit here. This is important. The 3 means we don't have to go up to the 2, so we can just replace that with a 0 and a 0. So it's 0, 0. All right, let's try the next number. So our next number is the B value. And so that B value is minus 3935.093. So where's our three significant figures? We've got 1, 2, 3, but we've got to be careful because the next digit is a 5, which means this dude has to go up. So it's minus 394, and then we put the 0 for where the 5 is there, and that's our three significant figures for B. All right, let's have a look at R now. So with R, let's write down all those lovely digits that they give us on the calculator, minus 0.964258. Three significant figures, so 1, 2, 3. And we just have to look at the next digit, remember, just the next digit, this one, and that's 2. So when the 2 doesn't do anything to the 4, so we can just leave that as negative 0.964. Make sure that point's nice and big. And just to emphasize also, if your B is negative, then your R is also going to be negative. It's just a mathematical fact. All right. Now, the last one we need to look at is the R squared. Now, we can do the same thing as we've been doing before. We've got 0.929794. And we look at three significant figures. So we go 1, 2, 3. But then that next digit we're going to look at. So the 7 affects the 9 and makes that 10. So it's not 929, it's going to be 930. So that's going to equal 0.930. But don't forget, R squared, you have to times by 100 to get it into a percentage. So it's actually 93.0%. And those are the values we're going to keep referring to when we write our report. And with the wonders of technology, it now looks beautiful in an all type thing. And we're going to keep those values in the corner as we talk about our report, and maybe some screenshots of what's happening with the calculator as well. When you get out of that, you can obviously see the graph. It automatically just puts that up for you. And we can definitely see this downward negative trend on these things. So don't forget, we've actually got some labels on these. So which one is which? Well, the X is this one, which we said was, this is the age in years, and this is the price in dollars. So just don't forget what your X and your Y labels on your axes are important. Well, we said put the residuals into list 3. So now we're going to do a graph of the residual analysis. So the important thing to always note here is, yes, our X is list 1, but now our residual is in list 3. So if you do all that, you should get a nice graph. And as you can see, there's no real pattern. It's just going, there's no, what we're really, when we're saying a pattern, there's basically 2 patterns. There's that pattern and that pattern. And that's not really showing that. So there's a bit of a peak in the middle and stuff, but there's still plenty of up and down. So it's not consistently sort of high, going low and going high again, or low, going high, and then back down again. It's not really following those patterns. It's not making a smiley face or a frowny face. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Now this is the full report that you would get. We can see I've got my values in the corner that gave me all this, but let's just take this slowly and go a sentence at a time, and then try and build up those sentence patterns and know which bits you've got to change and which bits you've got to keep the same. Okay, so we're going to be focusing mainly on this R value of minus 0.964. And we can see that's right in the sentence here. So you just put that in there. So anything I highlight in yellow in this sentence, you need to change that, and I'll tell you how to change that. So negative gives us the negative there, and 964 gives us strong. The linear actually comes from this graph down in the bottom corner here, because you haven't got a definite curve like this or a definite curve like this. And we saw that from the residual analysis before. So the only other bits you need to change here, well, we need to change this bit which says the price of a second-hand car, and this bit which says age. And what are they? Well, they're the labels for the y-axis. Remember, so this is price in dollars, and this is age in years. So that's the X and Y axis. That's your Y and that's your X. So this is just your, whatever your Y axis is for that question, put that in there. And this is your X axis. So put it in there. And then there are no obvious outliers. Don't say that if there are obvious outliers. If there's a dot out here, then you're gonna have to change your sentence to say, there is an outlier at, well, I put an outlier somewhere in at 6 years. Okay, so just make sure you choose one of those sentences. Okay. Now, you don't really need to write the whole sentence for these things. The main thing is to make sure you don't do Y and X. So I would say, to be honest, we know it's the equation of this, the line. And your main thing is to make sure that you change this and this when you're doing this. So again, what is that? That's your y, because your y equals a plus b x. So the x is the age and y is the thing. Now don't get all tied up with this. So remember, it's plus a negative in this case because we've got a negative symbol here. So plus a negative is the same as just putting a negative. So you don't have to write plus. Don't go around writing this like price equals 35,100 plus minus 3940 a. By the way, you could just use p and a. That's fine, as long as you just don't use y and x. That means that famous phrase, in terms of the variables, as a code phrase. If you see that phrase, it means do not use y and x. So this would be wrong over here. I'm trying to do a big X. But it's fine if you just used P and A. So if you just use P and A, we know what you're talking about and be fine, but definitely make sure you don't do plus negative, you just do a negative. Okay, so now we're looking at really the B value over here. And I'm going to just like shorten some of this sentence out because it make it easier for you to just cut and paste as a template. So the first part, the slope of the regression line predicts that on average, okay, the price. Now we don't need to say all this stuff about all the second-hand cars. You know, just ignore that bit. So we've got to say price. Now price, what's price? That's the y-axis again. And then this next bit says decreased, and that's because it was negative. So because you can see the b is negative, it's decreased. If not, you'd have to go, if it's positive, it'd be increased. So increased if it's positive. So you've got to choose between decreased and increased. And don't get stuck at it, don't do a double negative. This value is just the b value. Can you see we've got 3940. So decrease is the negative, increase is the positive, and 3940 is the value. You don't even have to say that bit about each year. You could if you wanted to. What the heck? Each year, and that's the that's just what the x-axis is about. Now our next value is just looking at the a. And again, I think they've been a bit too fancy with this sentence. We want to make it a bit more generic, but we can see the 35,100. And I just want to show you the original data because remember what we're saying, the intercept. The intercept is when the values are equals 0. So if you had 0 and you put 35,100 in there, that value doesn't stick out compared to the other values. It makes sense. I mean, if you had say an intercept and your intercept said 15,000, you go, well, that's a bit weird because 15,000 that should be down here, not up here at 0. So just some number sense, have some common sense about these things. So most of that sentence we can keep. The intercept predicts that on average. Now the price, we can keep that. What was the price? That's the y-axis. And you could say of these cars were new, but let's just make it a bit more generic. So let's cross that out. And just make it a more sort of normal sentence, which is on average, the price when age was 0 was, and then you just have to say change what age is because that's the x-axis. Okay, so if you wrote the same sentence, the intercept predicts that on average the price when age was 0 was 35,100. It's the same as that sort of thing, and then that's easier to swap. You just swap price, age, and the value for a. Again, so now we're looking at the r squared, which is the coefficient of determination. So this number has to change, and that's just the r squared, remember, as a percentage. Variation of price, now we don't need the rest of it. The variation in the price, so we just get rid of that. Variation in the price, just get rid of that, is explained by the variation in their age. What's the age? So price and age, that's again just simply y-axis and x-axis. And those red bits we can ignore. Now we're looking at that residual plot, which we did before. And if we kind of look at where the values are going, there's not a clear pattern. We are definitely not getting this or this, so we don't have to stress about anything. And then we just got to look at that sentence, what we can do. So the lack of a clear pattern in the residual plot confirms the assumption of a linear association between the price and age. And look, we don't have to keep saying of the second-hand cars, we just get rid of that. And so we know that these are just the y-axis and the x-axis. Probably don't really need to have the as well. Let's get rid of those thes between price and age. Now, your problem is, of course, if there is a clear pattern, then you have to say the opposite thing. So you might have to say a clear pattern in the residual plot confirms the data is non-linear. And you don't have to be exactly the same in words as those, but if you say those words, got yourself the point. And that's all we're here for, get ourselves the point. Okay, so we just neatened it up a little bit and got rid of that sort of like, you know, all the thing about secondhand cars. So the things you need to think about with these sentences is, this is a whole report. You'd have to think about strong, negative, linear, because that will all be based on your R, which you gave here. So all the highlighted things in yellows you have to change. And then I'll just highlight this in green because you might need to think about your option on that one. There are no obvious outliers. Don't just write that every time. There might be an obvious outlier. Then we have our equation of our line, simply put in the terms of the variables. That's all from the A and B values over here. And then there's a sentence about the price, and we said decreased 3,940. Remember, we said decrease was negative or increase is positive. Then we said the intercept predicts that on average the price when age was 0. So the price, again, that's just talking about your y-intercept, the A. Then coefficient of determination is 93%. Got that up there. And price and age we have to change every time. And the lack of a clear pattern in the residual plot confirms the assumption of a linear association between the price and age. Now again, that might not be true if there is a clear pattern. So if there is a clear pattern, then you have to say the exact opposite thing. So just as I was doing before, maybe highlight that in green. Is there a lack of a clear pattern? Don't just write that every time because there might be a clear pattern. And that's your whole report. And you can see the bits in yellow you have to change, and then think about the bits in the green. And you should be nailing it and getting, I think it's, 8 marks might be available for that one.